Joining me now is the 70th Secretary of State and Fox News contributor, Mike Pompeo. Secretary, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you this morning, Maria.
How would you assess the current state of affairs in terms of these talks for a ceasefire?
Maria, I think they're exceedingly unlikely to succeed. The premise of the talks is that all the parties want peace. But, of course, as you know, the leadership in Tehran, who's driving Hamas, who's driving the rockets that come into Israel every day from Hezbollah, they don't want peace. They have made very clear that October 7th, now we're coming up on 11 months, almost a year from that horrific attack. They said they want to do it again. They have had almost no costs imposed on them. This has been a free ride. And in the end, both parties don't want peace. And that's the fundamental mistake of the Biden administration. They have refused to impose costs on the Iranian regime in order to deter this terror against the nation of Israel, the Middle East, and frankly against the United States as well.
I mean, you've said many times there's absolutely no deterrence, and we see this over and over again. For example, this week, Google confirmed that an Iranian hacking group has targeted a dozen people's personal email accounts tied to former President Trump, President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, also in a long-running and ongoing phishing attack. This threat analysis report comes just days after the FBI told us it was investigating reports that Iran hacked the Trump campaign. Google, finding the group successfully gained access to the personal Gmail accounts of one high-profile political consultant, Secretary. So we did nothing about this either?
Make no mistake about it, the Iranian regime isn't just connecting these strikes, these military kinetic strikes. They're using political influence here inside the United States. As you know, Maria, we've talked about this. They're trying to assassinate American leaders, including former American leaders, including me, and civilians here in the United States as well. This hack, these series of hacks, is something that's been going on for a long time. And it's pretty clear. The Iranian regime understood that in the Trump administration, things were different. There would be real costs. Their economy was staggering. Their nuclear weapons program had been slowed to near halt. Those things were ongoing because the Trump administration put pressure on the regime. They've felt no pressure for the last 4 years, and you have 1,200 Israelis killed. You have Americans killed. You had Americans attacked at the air base in Al-Assad a couple weeks back. The Biden administration, Harris, won't even talk about it. The Iranians understand they have an interest in the outcome of this election, and they're going to do their darndest to try and influence that.
Well, it's just unbelievable. You know, you've had an attack attempt on your back now since you were in office. Now Trump gets his campaign hacked from Iran. They admit it's us. And then there's all these attacks on our troops in the Middle East. Again, what have we done about it? All we see is the Taliban celebrating. The Taliban celebrated 3 years of power the other day. They held a parade at the abandoned U.S. Bagram Air Base on Wednesday with American military equipment left behind during the Biden-Harris administration's botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Secretary, I mean, you and I have spoken about that withdrawal so many times before. The parade was attended by both Iranian and Chinese diplomats. Here's Kamala Harris discussing her role in the Afghanistan withdrawal in 2021. Watch this.
President Biden always said that he wants you to be the last person in the room, particularly for big decisions, just as he was for President Obama. He just made a really big decision. Afghanistan.
Yes.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do.
Well, she was comfortable with it all, Secretary. Your thoughts? We lost 13 servicemen.
Morally abhorrent. Right. I find this morally abhorrent that the Vice President of the United States, who was told, I'm certain, I was in the room for years when we talked about how it is we get Americans safely out of Afghanistan. I know what the military told her. They said if you withdraw in the way you're planning, you're going to have Americans killed, equipment left behind, and devastatingly bad outcome for the people in Afghanistan, especially women. And Vice President Harris said, I'm totally comfortable. I was the decision maker. I was the last person in the room. And she was bragging about that in the same way that the Biden team talked about this having been a successful withdrawal. I promise you, the veterans, the soldiers, the sailors, those folks who served in Afghanistan know that this was tragic. Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in part because he saw what happened in Afghanistan, and now we have tens of thousands of dead Ukrainians and a huge problem in Europe. For Vice President Harris to have claimed that, and now I am confident today or tomorrow she's going to walk away and say I had nothing to do with this, it is fundamentally indecent. And for the families who lost lives that day now, 3 years ago, to see what's taking place at Bagram Air Base, the American-built Bagram Air Base, It's indecent. It was an enormous mistake of epic proportions that the American people will suffer for years.
Unbelievable. Do you believe China will move into that Bagram Air Base?
I'm very confident they are already connected to it.
Wow.
Whether they formally move troops in or not, it's hard to know. But make no mistake, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians will all be working together in Afghanistan with the Taliban and against the United States of America. And the fact that President Biden and Vice President Harris made the decision to hand that over to the Taliban and leave American equipment behind, and all the Americans that were left behind will haunt the United States. It will haunt the Central Asia where it sits and haunt the Middle East for decades to come. We have to get it back. We have to get deterrence back. I'm confident that we can, Maria.
Well, I mean, I'm just very concerned about what's going on with all the propaganda coming out of communist China and the surveillance on American citizens and the 50,000 Chinese nationals that have come into this country in the last 2 years, Secretary. Do you believe that this is all preparation for the CCP to invade Taiwan and take over Taiwan and keep America out of that?
My sense is that Xi Jinping has every intention of doing precisely what he said he's going to do, which is he uses the term reunify Taiwan with mainland China. Whether it's through a formal invasion or not is hard to know, but all of the things you described, whether it's the propaganda, the influence campaigns here in the United States, the increased military pressure on the Philippines and the islands in the first island chain in the Western Pacific, all of those are elements of Xi Jinping exerting his power, exerting his influence, all aimed at convincing the Taiwanese people you can't sustain your independence. And the United States under the Biden administration has simply not done enough to ensure that the Taiwanese people have the things that they need to protect themselves and stay as the independent sovereign nation that they are.
All right, Secretary, it's great to get your insights on all of this always. Thank you so much,
sir. Great to be with you.